Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to another live Xanadu Gallery Art Business Academy online critique group session. Today is Wednesday, January 13th, 2021. Good to be back here with you on a Wednesday to talk about some art, look at an art and do some reviews and talk about the business of art. Just quickly, by way of announcements, next Wednesday, the third Wednesday of January, as is our tradition, will be an Ask Me Anything session. So you will see on the broadcast page that the form that's there that asks for feedback will change to a Q&A form. So if you have questions that you'd like to have me answer in that session, be sure and pop in and submit that question between now and next Tuesday. You'll also see an email next Tuesday announcing the session. You can submit questions then, but just be ready. Always fun to have those sessions. And then also you're going to see a little bit of a format change when you come into the Zoom next week. We've been using the Zoom webinar format, which has some advantages, but it also has some drawbacks. And the biggest one being that I have to manually allow those of you who are joining into the video session, which can be cumbersome. Especially for those of you who might join just as we're getting started or after. So we're going to switch and try at least for a few weeks, just doing the meeting where once you join, you'll be right in the video session. So just notice that it'll be a little bit different, but we'll roll from there, see how that goes. So those are the two main things. With that, I want to jump right into our review. Welcome our featured artist. Marc Schimsky, who is joining us from Pennsylvania. And Marc, it should be asking you to unmute now. And welcome to the session. It's good to have you here.
Well, thank you very much, Jason. I'm delighted to be here. I think this is going to be fun.
It is fun. And let's start, Marc, with just a little bit of your background, how you came to art, and kind of what you're working on right now.
Okay. I've been doing art since I was a child. I went to the State University College at Buffalo and earned my art education degree. I taught public school, high school art for 35 years. I went for my master's at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. I'm originally from Long Island. My master's is in printmaking, but although I hold a degree in printmaking, I've been painting in oil with a cold wax medium and in acrylics since about 2005, which is when I retired from teaching. There's a certain graphic quality, I think, to some of my work, to a lot of my work, because of the fact that I am, at least initially, I was a printmaker. I've shown my work in some local galleries in central and eastern Long Island, galleries throughout the northeastern US. But I started out doing outdoor sidewalk shows, which was a lot of work. I did it in the 1970s when I was a much younger man and I had more strength to set things up and take things down. And then I sort of reached out and started, I showed in a gallery in Chicago, and I've shown in Pasadena, California. So I'm trying to get beyond the northeastern US. I've never been able to really break into the New York City art scene, although I did once show a piece at the Museum of Modern Art, and that was only because I was part of an educational community there. But I like to say that I showed at the Museum of Modern Art in New York.
And why wouldn't we say that? Absolutely. That's not a bad kudo to have on your resume.
Yeah. I've shown at the Johnson Museum up at Cornell University and the Roberson Museum in Binghamton, New York, several times. And I've been showing also at the Monmouth Museum in New Jersey. I now live in Pennsylvania, so Monmouth Museum is close. And there you have it, really.
Yeah. Well, let's jump in and take a look at the work. And as you mentioned, Mark, the work definitely has a bold, and I saw a lot of feedback about this in the submissions, kind of a bold colors, as you mentioned, graphical style, strong compositions, and you mentioned that that kind of comes from, or that sensibility maybe comes from your background in printmaking. Maybe talk a little bit more about that as we look through these images, kind of where the inspiration for these pieces is coming from and process.
Sure. Uh, well, I love to explore the psychology of my subjects. The human form is very important to me. The individual is plays a very important role in my work. Um, Recently, I've been exploring the theme of singularity um, because of, well, there are two reasons for that. One is um, it reflects our present situation of self-isolation due to the COVID-19 virus. And two, I find that much can be deduced about human beings by studying and analyzing the human gesture and the human form when they stand alone. Um, but in addition to that, I frequently am compelled to look back on various experiences in my life. And I think a great deal, maybe because I'm getting older, I think a great deal about a moment lost, or a season, or an hour glimpsed, or the after image of a brief encounter. Most, if not all, um, my non-figurative abstract paintings can be viewed as reflections on those experiences. But the reflections are not always immediate to me. They come while I'm developing the work and making strategic decisions about color, rhythm, uh, variety, contrast, and unity. This is where my journey begins when I'm painting.
It looks like Zoom is misbehaving on me. I'm not able to, I'm trying to share images of the work, and I'm seeing in the chat that you're not seeing them. Mark, are you seeing those images right now?
No, I'm not.
Yeah, and Zoom has frozen up on me. Let's see. This is going to be a difficult conversation if we can't see what we're talking about. Boy, Zoom is completely frozen. Always fun to deal with technical issues. I'm going to see if it is distinctly possible, everyone, that the meeting is about to crash. If that happens, hop back on the page and join again, and we'll see if we can get this started. Hold on, hang on just a second here for me.
Jason, can you hear me?
while we're waiting for things to develop, I would be interested to know how you go about getting your work submitted to a gallery or a museum.
Well, I usually I have a subscription to several lists that notify me of shows that are coming, juried shows, non-juried shows, all kinds of things, all sorts of events. And I go through the lists and I decide where my work would best be served. I check out the jurors if it's a juried show. I see what kind of work the juror does. I submit my work to juried shows. And most of the time, galleries, various galleries throughout the United States will advertise their an annual juried show or a juried show based on a particular theme. And if the theme fits, if I think the theme fits my work, then I'll enter. And that gives the gallery an opportunity to see what I do. If they like what I do, sometimes I'll get a call and they'll say, we'd like to show your work again. Would you be willing to send us X number of pieces? That doesn't happen often, but once in a while, I'll get a call. Sometimes, I live right near New Hope, PA, which is on the Delaware River. I don't know how many people know that location. Here we go.
I think we're getting back into it, and I'm glad to see. I had to reboot my computer completely, but I'm glad to see the meeting kept going. Sounds like you've had good conversation while I was monkeying around, and so I'm glad to be back in. Marc, can you see the artwork now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. So I'm not sure where the conversation had gone, but let's jump if we can and talk about these particular pieces and kind of the inspiration and background on this work.
Well, some of my non-objective abstractions stem from what I like to call blind intuitive drawings that are executed as reactions to some auditory stimuli, meaning I play music when I'm working and the music inspires me. In this case, I was working on an abstract piece, and as the music kept playing, somehow I developed this head. I was thinking of Lancaster County, PA, which is not too far from where I live, and the buggies and the horses that the Amish people use. And somehow or another, it just developed into a horse's head. It's very playful, very whimsical. People love looking at it's almost a challenge for certain people, and they don't see it, they may not see it right away, but as they look at it longer, they begin to see the head and the neck of the horse. But that's not important to me. What's more important is the play of color, the juxtaposition of color and the texture, because that piece was done with oil paint mixed with a certain cold wax medium. And then it's applied with any one of a number of different things. It could be a brush, it could be a palette knife, it could be a spatula, it could be my fingers. And then to make things even more interesting, I will apply a propane torch to the surface, and the wax begins to melt and drip and blend, and I'll turn the board as I'm working in different directions to get certain effects, to get certain textures and effects. And I love the way that the colors seem to blend. I build up layers of paint and cold wax medium, one on top of the other.
And so as viewers are seeing the work and talking to you about the work, what do you find to be their their reaction and what are they interested in? Do you find them responding sometimes in unexpected ways?
Yes, I think most viewers look at a painting and they want to be able to identify something. They want to be able to label it, call it something. I don't, if they come up to me and say, what is this? What are you trying to represent? I'll try to avoid having to give them a definitive answer. I would rather that they interpret it themselves. For example, in this piece, I'm sorry, Jason, if you would just go back for a moment. The pipes are calling. Some viewers have seen this and said to me, it reminds me of 9/11. And that's not what my intention was at all. At 9/11, that's very sad. I mean, I could say it, I could lie and say that, yeah, this is a memorial to 9/11, but that was not my intention, my original intention. My original intention came from an idea, a memory actually, that I had about a pipe organ. And I love the sound of a pipe organ. And that's why I titled this, The Pipes Are Calling, which actually references a song, I believe.
Hello.
Yeah, I think it's is it Irish or Scottish? A Scottish song, the pipes are calling, and that's what I thought of when I saw this.
Yeah, I think that it raises a really interesting question. In fact, I have a comment in the deck from Jeff Green. And Jeff, I think I've got you here. You had made a comment about titles, and I think it's an interesting discussion to have. When we're talking about abstract work. And Jeff, I wonder if I could just bring you in and have you share your what you had said about titling or the general sentiment anyway. Morning, Jeff.
Hello. Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep, gotcha.
Yeah, for me, I thought the titles sometimes were almost unnecessary, maybe too strong a word, but I think the idea that people can bring to the image what they want and interpret it a little more freely, I think sometimes I find works better with abstract imagery.
Yeah, and so this is a real it's a bit of a challenge, right? And I would say not just for artists who are working more abstractly or more loosely, but even for landscape painters, photographers. How much do you want to give in a title? How much do you want to direct the conversation and kind of the experience and the thought process about the art versus that, which Marc, you already mentioned, you want them to bring bring their own interpretation and their own story to the piece. Jeff, maybe what do you think, or how have you approached titles with your work and kind of that thought process? And I want to bring a few more of you in with titles as well.
The way I've done it is more about kind of using the word to describe sort of the energy of the image as opposed to the subject matter. So whether it's kind of calm and peaceful or more frenetic is what I've done. So there's still a little even ambiguity in the title. But I guess I found myself, Marc, with your work, sometimes preferring just to immerse myself in the work and not think about the title. And it kind of sent me on my own journey a little bit.
Yeah, let me pull. Very great comments. Thanks, Jeff. Let me pull some of the rest of you in, and let's talk a little bit about titles and maybe what your philosophy and approach to titles have been. Gay, I see you've got a comment. And those of you who want to get in, if you're in the video and want to just throw a hand up, or if you scroll down on your screen, you'll see there's a hand icon that you can raise. But let's start with Gay.
I just titled things as I imagined them to be while I was working on them, and refine it that way. And as I work in series, they're in series anyway. Sometimes it's a fight as to which series I'm putting them in, but that's okay. But what I discovered over the years is, and I think I put this in a comment, people see what people see. And it doesn't matter how, quote, realistic something is, maybe that's more particular, but I've had people say things when they're looking at my work and they're thinking, where did that come from? I have no idea, but they see what they see. And I guess I tend to ignore titles to everything, even in a major art gallery. I don't care. I look at the work first, but some people find them very, very helpful, especially if they are not familiar with seeing work in place, in a gallery, in reality. I found that people just feel that they're wandering if we don't give them some help. But I think what I found is that people really see what they're going to see.
Yeah. Okay. Carol, let me go to you if I can. Carol, there we go. I've got you.
First of all, Mark, I love your work.
Oh,
Very
thank you.
much enjoying it.
Thank you.
And I love the titles. And I was especially impressed by your comments about how, as you're working, some bits of memory reflection come back, and that's what you're working through with this artwork. That's what I do as well. And for me, the titles for me have been extremely challenging topic, and Jason already knows this, because I've worked through a lot of personal history in the course of doing my artwork. And of course, in these times, we're all knowing there's a lot of darkness. And so I try to refrain from indicating exactly what I'm talking about in my titles. And but yet they're coming from me, and they're coming from a real feeling. I'm having a conversation with my art when I'm making it. I expect other people to have a conversation with it when they're viewing it. It doesn't need to be the same conversation. I'm fine with that. I mean, my artwork talks to me, and it should speak to someone else for what they need to hear and as they see it. But it doesn't mean that I'm, entirely removed from the process. So I'm enjoying this conversation. I'm interested to hear what other people say, and I'm trying desperately to I work really hard on my titles because I'm trying to get them down to just a little bit of something that I can still relate to, because that's important to me, but that won't scare people off.
It's titling is definitely, and I think we've kind of hinted around at what the challenge it can be with the title. Those of you who've been following me for a while know that I am adamant that artwork have a title. An artist brings to me work that is untitled number 42, we're going to have a conversation. It is a very fine line where you're right. You want to give something that can start a conversation or a thought process, while at the same time not dictating the direction. But having said that, I do find that viewers are not coming into the gallery wanting a completely neutral experience where it's just artwork that the artist is no longer present, that it's just the work itself. They don't want that. They want to know about the artist. They want to know the artist's background. Where's the artist from? Where is this coming from? What is the experience? And a title can be a good way to start that conversation and to have an engagement with the client. At the same time, I'm going to agree with Jeff and kind of echo that it is that fine line that we want to give them something that evokes that beginning of the conversation, But at the same time, we don't want to tell them where the conversation has to end and give them everything. And so that really is and can be the challenge. So I do think, you know, in a piece like this one, it's a conversation starter. What are the pipes? What's happening? What's going on? Or this one is a little bit more specific. A walk in Budapest. You know, that's telling me, okay, the artist has an experience here that he's trying to share. And it's pretty specific. That's maybe a little bit more specific, but still open to interpretation. I think that this piece, the title "The Wanderer," that kind of starts getting towards, I would think, a happy medium where I'm giving a suggestion of the sentiment here, but really leaving it open for the viewer to add as much as I have and to experience it. I will tell you that there have been many times where a title has helped, or maybe not helped, it has made the sale happen for a particular piece of artwork. There are times where an artist that I'm working with has created a piece and has just come up with the perfect title. And it's that title as much as the artwork itself sometimes that comes to it. And an example that I think of all the time, I had worked with a sculptor for a number of years. I'm actually no longer representing her, but she had a piece that had a large abstract figure kind of bending over and talking to a small abstract figure. And if you just looked at it and with no direction, you might say, oh, it's a parent talking to a child, or has that kind of feel. Then when you saw the title, which was A Conversation with Myself, it just totally changed the dynamic of the experience of looking at that work of art, and really, you know, that then really opened up an experience for the viewer and a thought process, and sold many editions of that sculpture. Not every title we come up with is going to have that effect, but boy, I think that sometimes you just know when you've come to you've completed a piece, and you've come up with the title, and you realize, bam, boy, I have really hit on the right title. And then you get the response from viewers, and it's worth the effort in doing that. Now, Marc, I want to jump ahead and talk just a little bit about, shift gears a little bit and talk about presentation, and kind of the format that you're creating in, and talk to us a little bit about how you think about the presentation, the visual experience that clients are going to have. Framing versus gallery wrap canvas and format, that kind of thing. How have you approached the presentation of your work?
Well, in addition to working on cradled board, I've also been working on heavyweight watercolor paper and using acrylics. First, I gesso the 300-pound watercolor paper, and then I use acrylic on top. If I do something on paper, I believe very strongly that it has to be matted and framed and under. I don't use glass. I use plexi, because very often these pieces are shipped to different places, and I don't want to have a problem with glass. Also, I use, just to save myself some money, I'll take the paper and I'll mount it onto a cradle board without a mat, without a frame, without any plexi. They stand alone as if they were paintings on canvas. But I'm a very strong believer in presenting work. Presentation is, I don't know. One of my old instructors used to say it's about 80% of your work. It's very, very important to me to present work properly, clean, and to hang the work in a certain way so that viewers can appreciate it, take the time to really focus on it, These shots that you're showing here are just walls in my studio. And when
Sure.
people come to my studio, hardly anyone comes these days because of COVID. But in the past, I've had people come to my studio and they like to see, what I'm working on or what I've done in the past. And so that's what this is for. But you'll see some of these images are just mounted on wooden panels, wooden cradle boards, and some are matted and under glass with a frame. I think that I've been to shows where artists just stack a pile of paintings on paper, one on top of the other, and they invite you to go and
Browse through.
sift through all of that. I don't like that. I know there are a good number of artists that do that, a good number of galleries that do that, but I think it's so much more professional looking when you frame and matte and glaze works of art, your own works of art. Not to belabor the issue, but I would just like to make a comment about titles again.
Sure.
I believe that the titles that I'm giving to my work are just hooks. They hook the viewer in, and then they start asking questions. Now, if I'm not there, the hook is really very valuable. I've heard from gallerists and collectors that it's helpful. They even go so far as to say to me, it would be nice if you can just place a little card next to the work on the wall, a little paragraph or two explaining what this is. And so, of course, I would not do that. I don't like going that far. I'd rather keep it open-ended.
I'm going to challenge you on that, Mark, because I'm going to tend to agree that, there are a number of you who are in this session who are with me in the Art Business Academy and know that we do have a whole lesson on artist statements and artwork statements. Part of what's interesting to me, and it happens here today when we're looking at the work and you're talking about the pieces and you're telling your story. Again, it's this idea that the artist is almost acting as a guide or an interpreter for us as we're experiencing the work. And in a gallery setting where you're probably not going to be there, to a certain extent, as a gallerist or my staff, we can hear those stories from you and retell them. But boy, it is sure effective to have it in the artist's own words. Again, we worry about this challenge. Well, am I telling too much? Am I limiting the viewer's experience by giving them the background and the story and what's going on? And I just don't typically find that to be the case, that a viewer will look at your title, hear your story as you're telling it or reading it in an artist statement. They'll either agree with that and find it interesting, or if they disagree, they'll just discard it and take their own interpretation to it. And I don't find that it in any way diminishes that interplay. It's just kind of, again, a starting point to that conversation. And we love to have the opportunity. We haven't had it as much this last year to have an artist in the gallery at an art walk where collectors can come in. Maybe they've been watching the artist's work and getting to know it. Maybe they've even bought some pieces, but they love to meet you because now they can be sure to have that exact kind of experience that we're talking about, where they get to kind of get into your mind and hear the background. And I only find that adds and makes the collector more avid. So if you can do it, and it's certainly a lot of work, and I know that a lot of us, we're here because we're visual artists, not because we're writers, and we don't want to spend our lives, writing narratives and stories about the artwork. But if it can become a part of your practice, I promise you're going to see some very positive impact from that. Those artwork statements that you could share in a gallery could also be shared on your website, could be shared on social media. and just add a whole other dimension or really dimensions to the experience that folks are having. And I wonder, anyone want to jump in with a comment on that? Gay, let me go to you first.
Just very quickly, I went to your website, and I have to say he does that with select works. You'll scroll your little arrow over it, and all of a sudden one of them will have the story of that particular work imposed over it. So it's not all of them, but I did notice that, Mark, and I thought that was really a challenge for me. How am I going to develop that? But he does do that, and it's very helpful. It's very enjoyable.
Thank you, thank you. And except for museums, I have not seen in galleries, little, I don't know what to call them, little cards with blurbs.
Statement cards.
Statement cards by the artist positioned on the wall next to the work. I mean, the only information that I ever see in most of the galleries that I've been in, most of the galleries that I have visited, it's just title, medium, and price, sometimes size, but price is the important thing. So yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with you. I haven't seen it, and it's a lot of work.
And you're right. It's, I don't want to suggest that every gallery and every artist should have a card with every single piece of artwork. Shoot, if I had my phone up and running, I could walk you around my gallery and show you several of my artists. Not all of my artists do it, but I have several who do write statements for each piece of artwork, and we do display a card next to the artwork. And it is interesting to see some people pass right by it, others stop, read it in depth. They want us to email a copy of the statement as they're thinking about buying the work of art, and so it becomes a piece. In all those cases. Two of the artists that I'm thinking of, this is just something that they've always done in their practice, and they provide cards to me with the statements on them, or they'll email it to me and we print them out on a card stock and show it with the work. And then one of the other artists, I encouraged him to do it, and he started doing it, and we've been hit and miss on how many pieces it's on. But I guess what I would say is that, is it required? Does it have to be there for the sale to happen? No. Certainly we sell hundreds and hundreds of pieces of art every year that don't have an artwork statement. But when it is there, and when you do have it, it can be very valuable. And then the other thing that I would just say about that is that I have heard so many times artists will mention to me how uncomfortable they are in an exhibition or at a reception, people coming up to them and asking about the work, and they're not quite sure how much to say or what are the right elements to talk about in the artwork. And what I think you'll find is that if you've gone through this exercise of thinking about the work and telling the story about the work and writing it up, that physical act of writing, it allows you to be insightful and thoughtful about what you're going to say, so that when you do have that experience and that opportunity, you already know what the conversation is going to be about and what you're going to be saying. So I would encourage us all, we don't do this very often, but I'm going to give you all a homework assignment from this critique group session, and that is to write up one artist statement for one piece of your artwork, a paragraph or two, and I want you to send it to me. Send me a photo of the artwork and your brief artist statement about it, or artwork statement about it, and I'm going to make it a conversation. Next week, we're doing Ask Me Anything. 2 weeks from now, I'm going to share those artwork statements that you send to me, as many of them as we get. You all know my email address. You get emails from me all the time. It's jason@xanadugallery.com. And I would just love to see what those statements are, and that can be a good jumping off point for a conversation for us about your work. And it's an opportunity for you to get to share your work in this session.
Jason?
Yeah, Mark.
I know it's getting close to the end of the session, but I would just like to ask a question to the group.
Sure.
The work called A Walk in Budapest that you have shown. One of my favorite pieces, incidentally. But that was inspired by a trip I took with my wife to 3 cities, Budapest, Vienna, and Prague. And the people in Prague and Vienna were surprisingly very welcoming and very, you could talk to them for the most part, I found. But in Budapest, it was strange because the people seemed to be, appeared to be very hesitant, very reluctant to say anything to you. They were very quiet. The people that were walking the streets, people we met in cafes, people we met in shops and so forth, were reticent about talking or giving you too much information. They would answer you, if they spoke English, they would answer you very in brief, very concise words. So it struck me that these people were still suffering from, I don't know what to call it. It's from Soviet rule.
Yeah, the after effects.
The after effects.
The suspicion.
There was, yeah, very fearful, very, they're afraid to say the wrong thing, so they would not start up a conversation. In most cases.
And so in an artwork statement about this piece, you've just given one. My wife and I traveled. This is what we experienced. I would perhaps think about writing that statement with some question marks. Was it because there were still echoes of their experience with the Soviets? Question mark. Were they reticent to talk to us because? And again, those question marks can just kind of engender the conversation and give the viewer an opportunity to participate in that conversation and evoke curiosity and thought from them. And again, I just think that it adds to my experience looking at this work to have heard you talk about it that way.
The title "A Walk in Budapest" is insufficient.
It's definitely a start. Definitely a start. And again, if you were there in an opening or a reception and I saw this piece, I'd want to hear about this walk in Budapest and hear you talk about it. But I do think that, and you might develop a series of pieces that are inspired by travels and your experience in seeing people in different locales. And the titles could reflect that. Melanie, I saw you raise your hand. Maybe you had a comment or a question. Should be asking to unmute.
Yeah, just real quick. I think, Marc, your work is absolutely stunning. And each piece, to me, just develops that curiosity, and I do agree that the artist statement might be helpful to just, to express your experience. But I think your title enough and wonderful enough to lead me on my journey as I look at your work.
Yeah, awesome. And again, it's a process, right? We're creating pieces, we're experimenting. Do some artwork statements and see how your viewers respond, how your galleries respond to them. And if it's a positive response and you feel like it's worth doing, do more of it. If not, this is one of those things that you could kind of let fall by the wayside if it doesn't work for you or isn't part of the practice or isn't helpful. But it's just worth experimenting, as so many different things are in the business. So we want to just give them a try and see what the response is. Marc, there were some other things I wanted to talk to you about.
Yeah.
And we're going to go a little bit over because I fell out for a few minutes. So we're just going to take that as extra time. Let's talk about pricing. this is a frequent conversation that we have in these sessions. Talk to us about how you arrive at the values for the work and what your pricing strategy is.
Well, it's based on two things. One is the medium, and the other is size. And I try to be very consistent. The largest piece is going to be more money, obviously, than the smaller pieces. I was once told by a gallery that they won't look at anything that I've done on paper. They do not deal with any works on paper. And I think that some of the works that I've done on paper are among my best pieces. So that's very frustrating to me, and I don't know how to handle that. The other thing is most people are unfamiliar with the process of oil mixed with cold wax medium, heated, and so forth. It leaves, for me, it leaves a very textured surface,
and some layers and transparencies.
Yes, things really, it becomes almost a relief surface. It's not smooth or flat like an acrylic surface or exclusively something done in oils exclusively. It's very textured. And I often wonder, like how do galleries handle that? Are they afraid to take on pieces like that? Like this one, Walk in Budapest, is very highly textured. You may not be able to see it in this photograph, but it is very highly textured, and it does. Some areas of the surface are become raised through the successive layers of oil and cold wax. So is this, I guess I have two questions. One is, how do you view dealing with works on paper?
Yeah.
And second is, do most galleries, are most galleries reluctant to handle works that are very layered, such as?
So I would say two things. One is I'd be careful about taking anything that any one gallery says as some kind of universal reaction and gospel, if you will, that this gallery doesn't like work on paper. You'll have a gallery that say we try not to work with pieces behind glass. And for an artist who's working using those presentations, it can be disheartening. I would just say push through that. Are there some biases and some tendencies for galleries to kind of stick to the mainstream of acrylics or oils? Sure. There's a market for that. But what I would say is that I do work with artists who are working in caustics and highly textured surfaces. And for me, it's a question about the quality of the work and the effect that's achieved. Has the artist chosen this medium because it is the medium that allows the artist to execute on their vision? And if that's the case, we can always find a way to display it. We can deal with the logistical challenges that come along with it. You'll find that there are clients out there who are just as excited about the textures and surfaces as you are, and will become avid collectors because it's not in the mainstream and what everyone else is doing. And so there are opportunities out there. We live in a very broad, diverse art market that has room for all of us, and has room for every medium and style. And so I wouldn't spend any time worrying about that kind of aspect. Could it mean that I have to work a little bit harder to find those galleries that are going to be interested? Yes, it could, but it also means that I get to stand out because my work is unique and different, and my medium is unique. And so I would just, I suspect that I couldn't talk you out of using those media or tell you that you should stop. And so if that's the case, I would just keep pushing forward and looking for the gallery owners and the collectors that are going to be just as excited about it as you are.
I've gotten a couple of messages on the chat.
Sure.
Saying that my pricing is too low.
Yes, those of us who are regulars here know that that is a common refrain that we are frequently talking about or encouraging to think about raising prices and moving them up. What I would say, and we are quickly running out of time, so I won't go into huge depth here, but I'll just echo what I've said in the past, and that is that often I will receive emails or in conversations with artists in the gallery. The question will be, what is my work worth? How should I be pricing it? As if, as a gallery owner, I should be able to give you an objective answer. I'm looking at your work. It's such and such a size, such and such a medium, and you've got several figures in it. It should be worth $3,200. When in reality, that's just not how the art market works. Your pricing is not some objective value that could be placed through a process of evaluation. Instead, it's a choice you're making. By setting your price at whatever level you set it at, you're choosing which venues are going to be appropriate for the work, which collectors are going to be most highly targeted and interested in purchasing the work. And so I would just encourage all of us to price aspirationally. Where do you want to be showing your work? What collectors do you want to have buying the work? And then look at look at those venues and look at those other artists who are showing in those venues and see how they're pricing their work, and strive to price your work accordingly. Now, having said all that, Mark, I do feel like you've definitely have room, to move those prices upward as you find venues or as you target venues that would be interested in the work. I don't feel like you're radically underpriced. There are some times when I look at work and just say, oh my goodness, you need to be way more aspirational. I don't feel that's the case here, but I do definitely see room for you to move those prices up as you push forward. And just in closing, Mark, what are your aspirations? What would you like to see happening with your work and your marketing and exposure and sales? Where would you like to see your career and your art going?
Well, two things. I would like to reach a much broader public. I would like to try to get into a more urban setting. New York, Philadelphia, Boston, Washington, D.C. These
Chicago, LA.
Yes, San Francisco, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to do that very, very much. I was once told by an instructor that you should keep your pricing consistent. So in other words,
and I agree with that 100%.
Okay, so if I show a work in a local gallery here in Pennsylvania, and there's an X amount of dollars on the price, that price should remain the same if I'm showing in Philadelphia or if I'm showing in New York.
And so what you're saying right now is exactly what I was talking about, that choice we're making, where sometimes in order to be able to show in those markets that we want to target, those galleries might look at the price and say, it's just too low. We can't afford to dedicate the wall space and our marketing efforts and our sales staff's time to selling work at those lower price points. And so, you're right, by changing the price and keeping it consistent, you may be deciding that the local Pennsylvania galleries just are no longer going to be a potential fit. But that decision is so important. You know, do we want to limit ourselves by letting a local market or the galleries that we're already in kind of dictate where those values are? And I would suggest that in the long term, we want to be thinking about our big goals and moving towards sales in those venues that will best show and sell our work and reach the right collectors.
So what you're
So
saying,
it's
then, so what you're
intentional.
saying then is that if I manage to have a gallery, let's say in New York City, dealing my work, the prices should be considerably higher.
I would suspect that most galleries in established markets would want to see the higher price points. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So it's I mean, it's an ongoing conversation. This is every week we're kind of chipping away at these questions, and boy, I sure appreciate all of you joining us for the session. Marc, thank you so much for submitting your work and letting us look and review and hearing your background and your stories.
Thank you.
The conversation will continue. We'll be back here next week, and again, I'll look forward to your questions for the Ask Me Anything session next week. And then also I'm going to follow up on our homework of playing around with some artwork statements in future sessions. Thanks so much, Marc. Thank you for joining us.
Jason, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining us.